Welcome everybody to the first session of the Northern Culture All-Party Parliamentary Group. I'm Jill Morris and I am acting as the introduction to the introduction of the Northern Culture APPG, which has just recently been formed. Today our first session is really to set the priorities or work out what the key priorities are for the North. And we're going to talk about how we're going to build back and level up Northern culture. So a very warm welcome to everybody who is joining us this afternoon for this APPG webinar. We've got a stellar lineup to give us their perspectives and priorities. We have Cully, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Leeds 2023. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Cully. Tom Wilcox, who's partner from Counterculture, who takes the lead position of being our first official member and sponsor of the group. So welcome, Tom. Looking forward to hearing from you. Tom Watson, as Chair of UK Music, I think doesn't need much introduction, but a big music fan when he's not rowing a boat and other things like that. So really pleased to get him on board. Dave Moutry, again, will be very well known to members of Parliament and others across the North, but particularly in Greater Manchester, as Chief Executive Home. And going to the North East now, we're going to Graham Thompson, Pro Vice Chancellor of Sunderland University, and also Arts Council for the North Area Council. So really pleased to have you all on board, but I'm also pleased that so many people are joining. I think I'm just looking, they're still coming in, but we've got about we had over 100 people saying they were joining us today. So it's a big event, I think, for the North, and a real opportunity to look at how we do level up and build build back culture. We know that the North's been hit hard, and one of the things I think that we can actually do via this group is to join that cultural ask to government and move forward. I mean, it's very simple and straightforward in terms of the terms of reference. We want to provide a united voice on pan-Northern culture asks and priorities. We want to generate debate on how to boost skills, create equal opportunities for all, promote diversity and support ambitions to empower future generations. And I think that's really so important across the North when we talk about levelling up, remembering about diversity and equal opportunities. Level up the investment, of course. We do need that investment to support Northern culture and to empower future generations. And we need to maximise the soft power of Northern culture and promote the North for its world-class reputation. People need to know that, that there's a lot happening and a lot to be proud of. It's a rich scene of talent that we have, and a great contributor to the economy. But of course, there is something like called COVID-19 pandemic, which has actually really had such a huge impact. So this is really about how we pull that back. I'm going to shut up now, you'll be pleased to know, and I'm going to hand over to James very shortly. But just quickly to know that this session is being recorded. Please use the hashtag Northern Culture and tag DevoConnect, and give us your thoughts on Twitter. Use the chat function and chip in if you want to with your comments and other thoughts, and we'll try and bring you in to as well. We want to hear from you, and just let's try if we can do it this one time on this session, to not shout out, "You're on mute." So can we start the much used term of the year? So let's try and mute when you're off and put them back on when you want to speak, and we'll all have a really interesting session. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to our newly elected co-chair, James Daly, who we've just had the AGM. Julie Elliott will be the co-chair. And I think if I remember rightly, we have Jason McCartney, Alex Sobel as vice chairs, Jeff Smith and Tony Lloyd. I think that is the elected officers. But I'll hand you over to James, and then we'll get started and hear from the perspectives from the panel. And over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Jill. As Jill said, my name is James Daly. I'm the MP for Bury North in Greater Manchester. I was elected last year, and what a year it's been. I think all MPs are united in Parliament in terms of the levelling up agenda, in terms of using what influence we have to make sure that every sector of the economy, of our cultural life, pulls together in the fight for more jobs, better businesses, better health outcomes, better social outcomes. And it's really important to all of us, and certainly MPs who make up the APPG, that we provide a strong voice in Parliament for Northern culture to make sure that whether it's the big cultural centres of Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, but also towns like Bury, who have a flourishing cultural sector, which has been hit sadly by the pandemic. So this is an APPG based upon the enthusiasm of its members, but the real underlying need to make sure that the cultural sector has a big voice in Parliament, that we can make sure that it has access to those funding streams it needs to survive and thrive going forward, that it's part of the agenda to upskill no matter all of our constituents, no matter their background. And we're just very, very grateful that we've got some esteemed speakers, as Jill said so far today. We're very lucky that you've come here to speak with us, and we are determined to make a difference. Myself, Alex, Jason, Julie, we want to make a difference and make sure that Northern culture has that voice in Parliament, and it will be a roaring and positive future going forward. So I'll hand back over to you, Jill, and back over to the panel, because that's enough from me. But thank you, everyone.
You're on mute, Jill.
Sorry, I've that's terrible. So sorry. I failed. That's a big fail. So Alex, I was just wondering if you wanted, as in your new role as vice chair, and also if you'd like just to say a few words of welcome and why you think it's important.
Yeah, I'm vice chair of this new group, and I'm also shadow minister for tourism and heritage. So part of this intersects in my shadow ministerial brief, and it's really great to see the number of people we've got on this call and the rich diversity of culture, and much of the culture of the United Kingdom and actually of the world comes from the north of England. And we don't need to look very far. From where I'm sitting now, we've got some of the birthplace in Leeds of some of the great musical institutions, and then obviously we've got people on the call from Liverpool and Manchester and Sheffield and other places, and obviously we have the Northern Soul, Wigan Pier. We've got a whole range of great cultural institutions, and in the arts and in the great museums and our heritage, and the heritage of many generations of immigrants starting, I was going to say Vikings, but probably a lot longer ago than that. But, we've got this great melting pot in the north of England, and we can speak up for that and show that. And it's really important that with the visitor economy gets going again, and that we get visitors from the UK, Europe and the world coming back to visit our institutions. This summer I went on this range of visits across mainly the northwest, actually. And I went to see, for instance, I went to Manchester, I went to the brilliant Home, I went to Morecambe and visit the Winter Garden, some of their theatres. There is such a rich cultural heritage. A lot of it needs promoting, some of it needs levelling up, as James says, needs infrastructure investment, but it's all there. It just needs us to champion it and to get the money into the right places and to get people back into the venues. And I think this APPG can play a really central role in that as we come out of COVID, and speaking up for your institutions and for our culture, from the grassroots right up to the international festivals and the high cultural institutions. So thanks everybody for coming, and we're here to support you.
Thanks, Alex. And I think your fellow Vice Chair, Jason McCartney, I'll bring you in as well very quickly, and then we're going to Cully.
No, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for joining this APPG. I mean, in my neck of the woods, Colne Valley, I've got half of Huddersfield, which has got the Lawrence Batley Theatre, we have a literary festival, we have a contemporary music festival, and then in my two valleys, Colne Valley itself, in Slathwaite, we have a Philharmonic Orchestra. In Marsden, we have an international jazz festival. And then in the Home Valley, where I am now, we have the Holmfirth Arts Festival. We have male voice choirs, one of which my dad's in. We have performing street artists. There is so much culture going on in our communities. And when I was on the select committee for DCMS, we had an inquiry onto making sure that Arts Council funding was being spread fairly across the north. And I hope that's going to be one of the big sort of aims and areas of productivity for this APPG. There is so much culture going on, and it's everyday culture as well. So Micron Theatre Group in Marsden, when it's not COVID, are out in communities, working with schools, performing on canal barges. This is culture every day, not just at the weekends, not just during the summer. And it really is at the heart of our northern community. I'm looking forward with colleagues being a big part of this exciting APPG. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Jason. That's terrific name check for for culture, and yeah, really brilliant. You know, to hear all that, and a great introduction, I think, to Cully, who's got the very important job of being CEO of Leeds 2023. So the big thing we're looking at here is the priorities, but also what you think the North needs to build back better culture.
Great, thanks, Jill, and everybody on the call for inviting me to say a few words about Leeds 2023. And I wanted to kick off and just say that there's famous words by the writer Raymond Williams, who says to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair inevitable. And in some ways, this year has proven how powerful culture and its connection to communities and individuals in finding solace and joy and moments of connectivity have been vital to people's well-being, and also just being able to convene together in such extraordinary context given COVID. For those of you who don't know, Leeds 2023, the city had spent a number of years striving to bid for being European Capital of Culture in 2023, but due to the UK leaving the EU, of course, we're no longer eligible for that competition. But the leadership at the council, and indeed many partners in the cultural sector and the business community and the cultural communities all came together and powerfully said that they were going to do it anyway. So it's an extraordinary statement from the city and its partnerships across its neighbourhoods and the wider West Yorkshire, that there is a real commitment to culture being a powerful force for enabling thriving communities. And I think our ambition is to ensure that we're still able to do that positively and to build and support the economic and social recovery of the city and region. And it's also true to say that the wider West Yorkshire and Yorkshire itself has a strong heritage and a mature cultural landscape from, as Alex says, you know, from the very high end, internationally renowned cultural institutions right through to the very core grassroots activity that supports everyday creativity in our communities, and is also the bedrock of our future generations of artists and makers and creatives. And I suppose within that context, it's worth just saying that my own personal journey comes from being profoundly influenced by culture in the North. Although I grew up in the Midlands, I came I was lucky enough to end up in Bradford as a student, and I'm one of those individuals from a working class community that wasn't expected to go to university, wasn't expected to be involved in anything remotely like culture like this. I joined because I felt I wanted to be a social worker, because that's where I felt the need was to support some of the communities I came from. But Theatre in the Mill in Bradford was profoundly influential in showcasing to me a whole load of opportunities that I hadn't ever witnessed, and saw the sort of emerging Phoenix dance company in one of my most powerful memories of a young man dancing off the walls in this small theatre, and realizing that, you know, that was an extraordinary thing to witness. And of course Red Ladder, which was a company based in Leeds, continues to thrive in Leeds, has been supported for many decades by Arts Council, City Council and its communities, who was taking work out to young people in communities and youth clubs. They gave me my first opportunity to find out about a world that existed that I wasn't aware of at all. And so my own education into the arts has come from surprising moments and surprising relationships and people opening those doors. And I feel that for us, in terms of a city, you know, that's striving to really connect with its public across a year to showcase all its talents from all its communities in all its diversity. And as previously said, you know, the world is in Leeds. Leeds is in the world in terms of its 170 communities, community languages that are spoken there. The heritage of its people is rich and diverse, and we want to celebrate that really powerfully by shining a light on that energy, that commitment, that creativity, and a sort of sense that there is a future beyond COVID, and that collectively we really want to celebrate our humanity together in all of our spaces, places and communities in as rich and as diverse a way as we can. And on that note, we will need all the partnerships and all our friendships and all our collective collaborations to make that as effective and as forceful as we can. And we'll need your help to make sure that the city, just because it's not part of a national formal programme like European Capital, does get the recognition and the investment it deserves to celebrate culture in all its variety. So I'll shut up there, because I know other people will want to say lots of other things.
Okay, and now we'll go over to Tom Wilcox and then Tom Watson, and we'll just keep it flowing. So Tom, really good to see you here. Welcome.
See you, Jill. Thank you, and thanks, Cully, and thanks everyone. For all the North's incredible cultural assets, in terms of levelling up and making the most of them, one of the things that's really needed is more investment in infrastructure and more focus on infrastructure, and that's both digital infrastructure in terms of distributing work, monetising the content that practitioners and arts organisations make, and also the digital infrastructure that helps to run cultural institutions, and also the physical infrastructure, you know, the buildings that art's delivered in, but the interconnectivity between cities in the north, which is an obstacle to more audiences seeing the great art that's available in cities that people don't live in. I'd also like to make a case for more thinking about aggregation within the sector. So, you know, within a town or city, why aren't there shared box offices more ordinarily? You know, why aren't we sharing data between organisations much more readily? Why aren't we thinking more about shared back office functions? A change in VAT rules would help that very much, but that's another story, and that's going to be much more possible soon potentially. But you know, how can towns and cities really make culture more than the sum of the parts in there, rather than disparate strands of activity going on? And I think that's one of the great challenges that isn't about investment and grants. It's about the will of the sector to make the most of the assets and the resources that it's got, and give great art to more people. And that's a challenge for all of us working in that sector. Thank you.
That's great, Tom from Counterculture. And now calling Tom Watson, if you're there. It'd be good to hear from you from wherever you are.
Jill, I'm in a kitchen in Worcestershire, and firstly, thank you, and hello to my former parliamentary colleagues. I should just say to you, by way of explanation, I've known Jill Morris for 25 years, which is why I wasn't surprised that she's put me down as a speaker today, even though I didn't know I was a speaker until I logged on 10 minutes ago. However, I've had a year to decompress from being Jeremy Corbyn's deputy leader. And if the last year has given me anything, it's the power to reflect. And the reflections I've got of 20 years in Parliament, when I look at the North, which is very dear to me, as Jason McCartney will be able to attest, I spend a lot of time in the North. The first is, I think the economic future of the North depends on it taking its own economic destiny in its own hands. And the very reassuring news for me is I think both main political parties are heading in the direction of greater devolved power and economic decision making to the North. And I'm very grateful to those Conservative MPs who are leading that kind of discussion at a sort of meta level in Parliament in their own party, because I think there could be alignment around this space in the decades ahead. The second for me is looking, having held the technology brief, is understanding that in the fourth industrial revolution, the only jobs that are going to be available as cognitive jobs are increasingly, cognitive powered jobs are increasingly automated with AI. The only jobs that are going to be available to our workforce are those that require creative problem solving. People with emotional intelligence, in the ability to work together in teams to dissolve economic challenges. That requires creativity to be at the heart of our curriculum, the creative industries to be at the heart of our economic thinking. And if the North can understand that and capture that, then there are very great opportunities in the future. So there are practical ways we can organise ourselves, as Tom alluded to in his presentation. But I think there are also some big, chunky policy issues that parliamentarians cross-party need to work through, which is why I dropped in on this call today, because I think Jill's ingenuity in setting up the group is going to really give a space where we can have that policy discussion in the months and years ahead. Thanks, Jill. You're on mute, by the way.
God. I said it's impossible possible that I've known you for 25 years. I'm only 26. So there you go. And now we have going to go quickly to Dave Moultrie from Manchester and home. Dave, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Jill, and hello, colleagues and everybody online. So I wish to do a few things. We know that the North is disproportionately negatively affected by COVID-19. It's been underinvested in for over 10 years, and this has exacerbated the negative impact on all sections of public life, including culture. The region will suffer badly in the recession as the economic structures are weaker at the outbreak of COVID-19. Cultural organisations are amongst the first to close and likely to be amongst the last out of lockdown. Even massage parlours and gyms can open before the highly COVID-secure museums and galleries and theatres and cinemas we've got in the region. Business models of cultural organisations of all scales across the North are really stressed, and it's unlikely that all will survive. Many organisations have undertaken large-scale downsizing processes that will inflict long-term economic and creative damage on the sector in the North. The freelance workforce and wider supply chain is experiencing huge hardship and damage. That will have a negative impact on the cultural sector's recovery. Local authorities that are major investors in culture in the North are facing the biggest budget crisis in a generation. So the non-statutory services such as arts will come into question. And the cultural sector in the North has built some fantastic partnerships with universities who are also now highly stressed due to the impact of COVID and the loss of EU research funding. So it's a difficult set of circumstances we face. Yet culture in the North defines our communities. It has a vital and wide economic role to play in recovery, especially on the high streets of villages, towns and cities across the region, where the retail sector is stressed as offices remain closed and tourism is limited. It plays a central role in our sense of community, place and identity. We need it's needed to rebuild confidence in the public realm and drive footfall. People have been locked up for too long now. It plays a key role nationally in feeding the talent pipeline across all art forms and all aspects of the business, and other businesses indeed, and can play a major role in the social and health recovery of our citizens and communities, and in particular, our most vulnerable people. So I think we need place-based kickstart stimulus support for reopening and re-socialising of culture in the public realm. I say place-based because one size doesn't fit all. What Cumbria needs isn't what Hull needs, isn't what Manchester needs. But we all have a need. We've got a need for promotional activity, and actually there could be some joined up promotional activity between our destination marketing organisations across the whole of the North, encouraging our local populations to re-engage with arts and culture as part of a health-based recovery. I was on a call recently with Wuhan in China, where businesses in Wuhan were actively encouraging their employees to engage in culture because it was good for helping their recovery from COVID. We need transport-linked packages to enable people and to support people coming out to our cultural attractions and organisations. Cultural-led regeneration projects. Tom Wilcox was talking about how investing in some of the plant that we need to work on. Some of that should be really focused on us decarbonising the cultural sector. We've got an important role to play, not only in decarbonising our practice, but encouraging changes in behaviours and lifestyle amongst our audiences. We speak to a disproportionately higher audience than many others. We need support for grassroots and amateur work. It seems to have fallen off the face of the earth. The brass bands in the north, the amateur drama societies, all of those sort of things, choirs, absolutely vital to our culture, desperately need support to get going again. Support for our local authorities and their cultural provision. We've seen recently Tees Valley working very hard to support their cultural sector with a regeneration package. Great example there. Support our universities, who are at the vanguard of our talent pipeline and innovation in the sector. We mustn't forget them. I mentioned action around decarbonising, but investment in decarbonising. The North of England, institutions in the North of England are at the vanguard internationally of decarbonising the cultural sector. We need to build on that and wave that more. Investment in R&D and innovation. Again, Tom mentioned some of the work around digital and the intersection between digital and culture and the blended methods that we've developed. How do we grow that and build that? Investment in our broadcasters. The culture wars and attack on the BBC and others will not help us in the north. We've got major investments of BBC in broadcasters across the north of England, and we don't want to see them going. And finally, at the end of my rant, better public transport. That's going to help all of us. It's absolutely vital. The fact that it takes me 3 hours to get on the train from Manchester to Newcastle, where I work in collaboration, is bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre, and is only an economic hindrance. So, yeah, thank you.
Great points there, and just joining up how culture actually impacts on everything we do, really, from health to transport, and how important it is. So thanks really very much for that. And finally, but by no means least, Graham, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I kind of agree with everything that everyone's said so far, so I'm slightly running out of things that I can add to this debate. I wear a number of hats in the area of culture and the creative industries, but right now I'm here representing my colleagues on the North Area Council for Arts Council England, and we cover an area stretching from as far south as North Lincolnshire and Derbyshire, all the way up through the northwest, through Yorkshire, Humberside, Cumbria, and the northeast, right up to the Northumberland border with Scotland. And the north of England has been particularly successful as a beneficiary of the Arts Council's decision to spend more of its funds outside of the capital. In fact, if you exclude London, ACE spends more on the north than any other of its areas, and quite right too. And whisper it quietly, but there's also more Arts Council staff across the north than anywhere else. But of course, the whole point of today's initiative is to champion, campaign for an even greater share of national resource to support our ambitions for arts and culture. So while there's much to celebrate, there is clearly a lot more to be done to fully unlock the enormous potential of this part of the UK. Today actually sees the lion's share of the £58 million capital kickstart fund coming here to the north. Recipients include Grimm & Co in Rotherham, West Yorkshire Playhouse in Leeds, Live Theatre in Newcastle, and perhaps most notably the Factory in Manchester, which on its own is receiving £21 million from a fund that, well, it's kind of designed to support ongoing construction and venue maintenance through the pandemic. In my own area of Sunderland, plans to create a secure, socially distanced outdoor auditorium in the city centre have been supported with a grant of £1.4 million. That space is being developed as part of a new 480-seat theatre, the fire station, which is due, because it's built around a Victorian fire station, and it's due to open in June next year. And the city of Sunderland itself, with its population of nearly 300,000 people, has actually become something of a poster child for the way in which culture-led regeneration achieved through partnership can transform a place. And that journey only really properly started in late 2013 with an investment from ACE in a creative people and places project, the Cultural Spring, which is, very community-based. And I mention this really just to make the point that changing perceptions and the actual landscape of a place doesn't need to take decades. And in terms of Jill's brief, really, which was what can we do better to attract resource and showcase what we have here in the north, I think actually more partnership working is one answer. Cully and Dave have already mentioned this. In Sunderland, the university has partnered the City Council and a privately run business trust, which is developing the cultural quarter of Sunderland. And partnership work isn't always easy, but actually, when you get it right, it multiplies impact. I can talk a bit more about funding if you want. DCMS is announcing today that what's left of the £1.57 billion Culture Recovery Fund, I think it's about £300 million that's left, is being made available as grants to support organisations preparing to fully reopen beyond spring 2021. Another 100 million will be offered in loans. And over these past difficult months, Arts Council and DCMS have obviously, to give them credit, invested millions in supporting theatres, museums, galleries, libraries and other arts organisations to help keep their heads above water. And it's obviously, it's never enough. And we all know that there have been casualties. 55,000 in creative professions, according to a report yesterday by the Centre for Cultural Value. But, we must also acknowledge that many more jobs have been saved alongside so many of our most cherished venues and organisations. And since March, there have really been countless examples of ingenuity, enterprise, innovation, shown by artists and producers and performers and makers. And these themes are also running through the Arts Council's new strategy, Let's Create, and the delivery plan to take it from the page and into communities will be published in the new year. So I think finally I would just say, it's important that we maintain this momentum after what's been a really disruptive and heartbreaking year. So of course, we welcome the setting up of this all-party parliamentary group. We'll support you in any way we can. And indeed, we also support the launch of the Northern Culture Network.
That's great, and I think we've had a marvellous introduction to the All-Party Parliamentary Group, and again, you know, what a rich seam of talent we have on our panel. I'm going to sort of hand back to James, if you're there, to sort of kickstart the Q&A, but also to give some responses. We've had some great questions from Mike Morris, Trevor, where are you? Trevor McFarland. Be quite good if we could perhaps bring them in, but maybe a quick. If I hand over back to you, James, and you can bring things in and get the debate started. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jill, and thank you to all the speakers. I on a personal level agree with much that's been said. I think there are some challenges. I look at the chat and there's some issues which we're going to bring out and talk about a little bit more. But as somebody who is, I'm not somebody with a great expertise in this area, it is fantastic for me to learn and listen and to be able to develop with the sector the policies and the campaigns at a national level in Parliament that we need. So thank you very, very much for that. Jill, can I just ask, is it the chat function where the questions are?
Yeah, so we've got a really good one from Trevor McFarlane. I don't know if you can bring him in, Olivia.
Trevor, are you there?
He will be there in a minute. If I can just find it. There you are. There's Trevor McFarlane. He is an early contributor. And if we could also get Mike Morris, no relation, and probably Alex Saint, is it? Those three, and then we'll take their questions and go from there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Trevor.
Hiya, James. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a noisy spot, so if it gets too noisy, I'll log off, and you can just maybe read out the question. But in short, really, it was just about the obviously the government's new Levelling Up Fund, which a chunk of which is coming to local authorities, which is absolutely brilliant and might go some way to replace the 850 million that's been cut to arts and culture every year over the last 10 years. So that is brilliant news. It's not really enough, and I'm sure most people on the call would agree with that. But how do we make sure that some of that is ring-fenced specifically for culture and the arts and creative industries, and not lumped in with the general infrastructure and transport pots, which seems to be the case at the minute? And then part two of the question for the whole panel is about the upcoming Shared Prosperity Fund, which I think for me is going to be the political sort of battleground for the cultural industries in the coming 5-6 years, when that's going to be divvied up. Again, how do we maintain progressive distribution methodologies that are based on need rather than politics, as we saw with the Towns Fund? So thank you very much, and congratulations, Jill, on getting this together. This is exactly the kind of forum we need, and thanks for James and Alex and all the vice chairs for getting involved and working on this cross-party. It's really important. Thank you.
I think that's a fantastic point, Trevor. And one of the things we've got is the Levelling Up Fund announced by the Chancellor recently, which is about this levelling up agenda. And although we're talking about the very important issues about infrastructure and digital infrastructure, I think individual MPs can really influence investment in their constituencies in the cultural sector through the Levelling Up Fund. But panel, Graham, do you have anything to say in respect of that?
Turn my mic on. Well, you look at the news at the moment around the uncertainty around Brexit. You look at the uncertainty around how long it's going to take to get the vaccine rolled out. I think we've got to plan for a post-COVID future. But I think there is still so many unknowns, and from an Arts Council perspective, I think what we're doing is we're trying to meet the current needs that we can envisage with the money that DCMS and the Treasury have provided. But I think the Trevor's point about the Shared Prosperity Fund is a good one, and we'll all await with interest how that's going to be rolled out.
I don't suppose you've got a view on this, but I was also very interested in what you were saying about opening up theatres and cultural venues for audiences, which I agree with. Could you perhaps just tell us a little bit more about what you think should happen with that, and also the points that Trevor's been talking about?
I think there's going to be a need for a stimulus package next year, because we know that we're going to get there's the psychological damage that's been inflicted on our communities. People are frightened to go out, concerned, etc. It's going to take a while to get that through the system. 18 months, maybe as long as 2 years. So encouraging people and letting people know that our venues are COVID secure. Home spent £60,000 of public money becoming COVID secure to a really high standard. And it's absolutely bizarre that we can't open and play our role in the recovery of our people. So encouraging people to come out and enjoy and take part in culture is going to be really important. So there's something around that, a stimulus around that. The other thing is that de-risking reopen is going to be important. So next year, if at the moment there's talk about a not before date of Easter and for level 5 protocols. So level 5 protocols are the protocols that venues need to adopt to enable them to allow the public in. And level 5 is what you would have had before, as in no social distancing. And the government are talking, it's not an official announcement about that not being before the Easter, which means that it's going to take a while for us to get into a position where people are used to going back into a full venue. Now, because of the economic model that the cultural sector has worked on in the past, where 80% of income, for the most part, is through ticket income, if you're a concert venue, if you're lucky enough to get some sort of subsidy. And in many cases, in the commercial sector, it's 100% is ticket income. If that's going to be majorly negatively impacted on for 18 months to 2 years, it's going to take us a while to get these places open. So some sort of support, tapering support that de-risks reopening is going to be very important. And the final thing I would say is that shouldn't be exclusively for the professional sector, because there are masses of community organisations out there that are doing absolutely vital work, and that particularly represent the wonderful diversity of the North, that should be enabled to reopen and de-risk themselves. So those are things that I'm thinking about particularly that might be sort of an answer to your question, James.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Can I bring in Mike Morris? Mike, are you there? Hopefully Mike is still with us.
Unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Oh,
do you want to make your point to the panel?
Yeah, hi, panel. I'll keep it brief. Do you think it would aid the development of culture in the North and other regions if Arts Council in England was broken up so that it was more transparent and the regions had power to distribute funding? It was a fairer share of the funding across the regions to counterbalance the weight of funding in London's favour. And I would just say, I'm co-director of Writing on the Wall. Based in Liverpool, we are an Arts Council national portfolio organisation. I'm not a critic of the Arts Council in that sense, but I was pondering about changes taking place, in the country, which, on political and social levels, and in terms of the funding, which I know the Arts Council has made some really great strides in beginning to devolve. But do people foresee this happening, and do they think it would be a positive thing if it did?
We'll come back to Graham in a minute in respect to that, but if we just go to Tom Watson first. Tom, do you have a view on that?
Tom, welcome.
Oh, Tom Watson's gone, James, but I can give an answer
Sorry,
to that.
Tom. I was going to
Not at all. Well, I think my view on that is that I think 18, 19 years ago, the regional arts boards were subsumed into the Arts Council, and I don't think there was any more regional spending, non-London spending then than there was once they became part of the Arts Council. So I don't think it's a structural issue about the funding system, about how much treasury money is spent in the North. I think there are other things that can be done about that, but reorganising the Arts Council, I don't think really would help. I mean, the biggest factor really over the last 10 years has been local authorities losing their discretionary expenditure and being unable to continue to support the arts outside London. That, you know, that if there's one thing to concentrate on, I think that's the area of greatest potential return for the arts infrastructure in the north.
I think that's a really fantastic point, Tom. I mean, Bury, where I'm the MP, is the GM town of culture at the moment. Unfortunately, it's been a difficult year in respect of that, but the investment from the GMCA, from the Mayor of Greater Manchester in supporting that is absolutely crucial to our cultural renaissance. So can I just ask, Cully, do you have any views in respect of that?
I'd echo what Tom says, the power and influence of local authorities and those community organisations that are really embedded in their communities. You know, that's a powerful engine of transformation and placemaking. And I think one of the things that we as a cohort should also be doing is thinking about the narrative around culture, because we're not very good. You know, there's often very binary choices being made in the discussions, and culture is in our everyday existence. It's about who we are, it's about how we represent ourselves, our communities, our stories. It's about who's telling those stories, it's about where those stories are being told, it's about our everyday engagement with our ability to say who we are. And that's what makes a place, and that's what makes a town, that's what makes a city. And of course, investment is really, really important part of that kick-starting, but so is opportunity. And actually, some of the structural deficits we have are to do with our lack of engagement with diversity, with inclusive practice, with understanding the very rich cultural experience that everybody brings to the table, and that our focus on one end at the expense of another end sometimes costs us dearly, because we don't embrace the holistic ecological function that is necessary in order to seed the future and in order to enhance our towns and cities and our people. And that's why I think you know, Dave's point about making sure it goes beyond just the professionals is, I would also argue, it's you know, our freelance community has suffered enormous damage, and we still don't seem to understand that the investment the creative industries makes is significant to this country's economy, and yet we're losing sight of a whole generation of creatives who can't see beyond next week, next month, the end of the year, never mind, you know, helping me to celebrate something that's, you know, for some people is too, you know, a long, long way away. So I think the need to really think about a quite complex approach to supporting the northern region and galvanizing the narrative around what culture is beyond our you know, the norm about what the mainstream is really, really vital.
Thank you for that. And can I apologise to the panel? And I'm going to fire through some questions now. So we're running out of time, so I do apologise. But I think this is a hugely important question. How do we ensure that young people in the most deprived parts of the north have access to social and cultural capital, essential for their future success and crucially important for levelling up? Dave?
How do you? Yeah, I think there's a major role to play for all those organisations in receipt of public money to make sure that they're making that available. And I think there's also a big job for us to do in terms of our relationship with schools. I once heard a young person from Contact Theatre say, "How can you aspire to something you've never seen?" So, and that's really important. So initiatives like the local cultural education partnerships, the one in Manchester, we're actually working with the education sector, looking at how we can influence the wider curriculum through culture, as well as providing experiences for young people. So there's a big job for us to play there, but also we need to be looking at how we provide resources for young people to do their own self-defined thing. How they can build and develop their own ideas and develop their own businesses and move things on. I've been around. Look, when I first started in this business, there was a thing called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, and lots of theatre companies, dance companies, bands Oasis famously thanked Margaret Thatcher for supporting the start of their band through the Enterprise Allowance Scheme. That sort of investment in talent is something we need to be thinking about.
Thanks, Dave. Alex Sain, to you there, Alex, with a question.
Hi,
Alex?
I've just unmuted. Sorry, you have to raise your hand.
Sorry,
and
Alex.
Someone then from on the other side of the sphere lets you in. So yes, I mean, just quickly, I'm from Creative Tourist. We're not freelance, but we are nevertheless a sort of organisation that sits on the outside of the funded sector. But we are here, and we do an awful lot of support. In fact, we've worked in places across the whole of the North as an agency on the very things that Dave and Tom Wilcox and all of you really have been calling for in terms of good practice, in terms of partnership working, collaboration, data sharing, etc., etc. And for really over 10 years now, we've been trying to develop a kind of a North-wide approach to this, but we constantly hit borders, and we constantly hit boundaries, local authority boundaries and place boundaries, etc., etc. How can this group help make that different now? What's going to make it different now?
Okay. Well, I don't want to answer the questions myself here or whatever, but the hope is that through the cross-party political working, the pressure we can bring at a national level, and my experience, we're all experienced, I'm still a councillor in Bury, that we can work together and can build upon the experience and expertise of the people on these calls, actually do and campaign what the sector wants us to do rather than what politicians think we should be doing or ignoring, basically, because the sector has not had the support it needs, and we need to have that unified northern voice going forward, is my view. Again, I'm sorry, Alex, due to time, I won't bring the panel in respect of that, but can we just hear from Beth Hewitt as well, please? Beth, are you there?
Unmute. Sorry. Hello. Yeah, I'm actually just I seem to be just saying I agree with Dave, everything that Dave's been saying actually, and I think it's really important that we put education as well at the forefront of this, and it provides so many routes through to the creative industries, and I think for schools, colleges and HE to be linked really closely with these organisations, with the broadcasters, with the creative industries, absolutely imperative. And I think for me, diversity and inclusion, if there's any good to come out of this, I think it's that we've all been shaken pretty much to the core, and we have to focus on inclusion and diversity. It's a massive struggle. And when I hear Dave talking about, you know, the 18 months, 2-year recovery, and we were talking before about, you know, dividing up the kind of transport issues in the creative industries. Actually, when he was talking about that, I was thinking, but transport's key to this. You know, what stops me going into Manchester? Sorry, if I'm talking public transport, I'm not happy jumping on a tram because it's crowded. And so many people feel like that. And I think the honesty in talking about that will help us really move forward. People are afraid, and people don't do things that they don't have to. So they might have to go to work, but they don't have to go to the theatre. They're deprived when they don't go to the theatre, but they will live with that because they're getting in. So I think those real honest discussions about how we can all work together and encourage people and support people and find the funding to allow people to go back into culture, because without it, we're really scuppered.
Thanks, Beth. Tom, have you got a comment to make in respect to that? Tom Wilcox?
Not particularly, James. I mean, I agreed with the premise of the question, actually, but I don't have much to add to it. Sorry.
Brilliant. Okay, we've got Councillor Jane Black from Bury. Jane, are you there?
I think we've had problems getting her unmuted or bringing her in, but...
Okay. Cully, can I just ask you, in terms of just generally bringing things to a conclusion here, Cully, and what we've been talking about, what this APPG wants to do to support the sector, is anything else you'd like to say to sort of round up your views of what you think we should be doing and some of the things that we can take forward?
Well, I think it's been echoed before, you know, the notion of collaboratively working together and having a shared sense of priorities around all the strands that are necessary is going to be vital. I don't think you can separate out lots of things, but I think my one call would be to really think and support those local authorities that are really trying to put culture at the heart of their economic and social recovery. I cannot tell you how important and vital that is for every town and every city. And in that context, we will find that we can then talk through some of the kind of areas that we've touched upon, which is both supporting our internationally renowned cultural cultural institutions, as well as our embedded community engaged practice, creative education, and support for young people and their creative imaginations.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks for the brilliant work you're doing. Tom Wilcox, anything to say to finish off, Tom?
No, just that the answer is not just about investment. It's about how we work together as a sector and a region, you know, across the north, to do things better. So the answer is in our hands, as well as being a central government and other funder issue. It's got to be both.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Dave?
I actually think Cully and Tom summarised it wonderfully, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. Graham?
I think that the message from today really is that we need to stay joined up and be more joined up. And just in answer to a previous question about whether or not the Arts Council should split across the north, I genuinely think that would be a bad idea. I've gained enormous insight from being on the area council by getting to know colleagues from across the north, and we've got a much better understanding. I think that the kind of powerhouse that cultural powerhouse around Manchester has been enormously helpful, actually, in focusing government and other attention on the potential of that kind of investment right across the north of England. And I think in terms of the comments about education, I think we need to keep the pressure up on the Department of Education around the importance of creative subjects in schools. We at a sort of university level are seeing the impact of that policy. I thought the Durham Commission last year was fantastic in providing real evidence of why young people need to have access to music and art and other subjects at school. It hasn't quite sunk in yet, I don't think, but I think we should just keep that pressure up. And I think, as Dave said, we should hold to account all arts organisations that are getting public funding to ensure that they really prioritise work with young people.
All right, thank you, Graham. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the people who commented in the chat box. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody. Jill, over to you.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to say, I think it's been a great session. Been trying a long time to try and coordinate this, but I think the time is now. I think we've got some really pressing challenges ahead. I think an exciting programme of work next year, 2021. God, we're not long. So hopefully more people will come on board, join the club, and have that pan-northern ask. But I'm really, that key part of the terms of reference is about tomorrow's generation, whole thing about education and diversity. I think it's really key, and I think I'd really like to make that point. One of the things I think I would like to do, if James and the other officers are keen, is that we will do a letter to say these are, this is where we are today to sort of launch the the Northern Culture APPG, just as sort of actually as a statement of what we're trying to do, and that would be quite good. But just want to say, look, this is a very important day for all of us, and let's all get behind it, and come to the next session. There'll be lots of opportunities really to get some thought leadership on that. But the big thing is, it's not a competition. We're better if we can all come across and work together and support. What's good in Leeds is good in Huddersfield. What's good in Manchester is what's good in, it all connects. So let's get working. I love that piece about, culture being at the heart of basically everything that we do, and from health, transport, all of those things. So really good. I'm really pleased to have James as co-chair and Julie. They'll make a terrific team, I'm sure. And ultimately, we've got all bases covered, I think. So let's look forward to seeing you next year, I think. And thanks again, James. Bye.